Welcome to the July 18th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Oswego Development Review Commission. The meeting will now come to order. Iris, would you please call the roll of commissioners present?
Arthur?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Shearer?
Here.
Fransted?
Here.
Sangre is excused. No, wait, Sangre, is he here?
No.
No, okay, and Lyons is excused. Dews?
Here.
Thank you. Oh, he is here.
Lyons is right there.
Okay. Right, Dews is
Here.
over there. Got you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before going into our agenda, I want to again recognize and acknowledge the service of our immediate past chair, Jeff Scherer. Thank you very much for all your excellent work as chair and your leadership of our commission. And I wanted to also acknowledge and recognize our new vice chair, Kurt Smith, as seasoned and mature commissioner with a lot of judgment and insight. And welcome to all of our commissioners. Excuse me, I'm somewhat hoarse tonight, but I did test negative for COVID, so hopefully you'll bear with me. Thank you. We have 2 minutes on the agenda tonight. I'd like to direct the attention of the commission to the draft minutes of the June 20th, 2022 meeting of the Development Review Commission. They were in our packet. We've all had an opportunity to review them. Commissioners, after your review of the draft June 20, 2022 minutes, are there any changes to the draft minutes as proposed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded.
Who seconded?
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The draft minutes of the June 20, 2022 meeting are approved. We also have a set of minutes for July 6th, 2022. These are also in your packet. We've had an opportunity to review them. Commissioners, are there any changes to these draft minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Those draft minutes are approved. Thank you. We're now going to move into a continuation of a public hearing on LU 21-0078, which is a request for approval of development at the Rassekh property relating to a new park. There's a major development conditional use permit for an athletic field, skate park and lighting, a 65-space parking lot, constructions of a maintenance building, a picnic shelter, restroom, dugouts, play area, and related site improvements, including utilities and walkways and a pathway, as well as the removal of 28 trees. Deputy City Attorney Boone, would you please lead us into the continued public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't need to go over the procedure, but I did want to first remind the commissioners, if you did not attend the previous meeting, we'll need to inquire as to whether you've read the record and are able to participate. And I'm thinking, just memory here, Chair Arthur, you were not at the past meeting?
No, I was here.
You were there? Smith?
I was not.
You were not. Have you reviewed the record?
I've reviewed the record.
All right. Is there any other commissioner who was not at the meeting? Okay. At this point, I would ask the commissioners if anyone needs to declare since the last meeting, I hope not, any ex parte contacts or site visit, any new bias or financial conflicts of interest have arisen. Hearing none, then Mr. Chair, you may proceed if you want, I suppose, with Senior Planner Evan Fransted with sort of a staff memo, and then to deliberation.
Thank you. So on this one, we did continue the hearing from July 7th, requesting written testimony only through July 13th. And then rebuttal testimony was due on July 15th. And Planner Evan has prepared a supplemental memo for the commission. So perhaps you could review that and any other thoughts you have.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair Arthur. Yeah, as you said, the hearing on July 6th was continued. For new evidence to be submitted by 3 o'clock on July 13th, we received 10 additional comments in support of the application, and let's see, 3 comments in opposition. And then we received rebuttal evidence from the applicant that was due by 3 p.m. on July 15th, and that is Exhibit F18. The comments in favor were mostly around this, they were in favor of the skate park. That's mostly what they pertain to. As far as the comments in opposition, they raised issues or concerns about parking, street improvements, sensitive lands, and traffic impacts, as well as asked for master plans for the Lusher area. One comment asked for a municipal code amendment to prohibit skating on surrounding streets, and another one raised issues about potential lighting impacts. And my memo goes through each one individually. I guess you can let me know if you have any questions to any of those items.
Did you have any other comments you wanted to make?
Nothing that's not in my memo. I think the purpose of the memo was to provide staff analysis. So if you have any questions, or I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, before we go into deliberations, are there any questions of staff about this proposal for the Rassekh Park? It looks like parking was one of the issues that was raised regarding adequacy of parking. But as I recall, staff addressed that and it was commented upon at our last hearing. Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to add about the parking requirements and the sufficiency of parking in light of its proximity to Lake Ridge High School and other competing uses?
Well, I guess my staff report goes into more detail about some of the issues raised. And I should note that, so the parking study found that basically 62 parking spaces were required for the sports field, and 3 spaces were required for the skate park. The playground was considered accessory to the use, and it wasn't considered to require additional parking. But the 3 parking spaces for the skate park, it's not saying that only 3 parking spaces are required. It's in addition to the 62. And the uses are expected to offset, so the hours. So there should be more than 3 parking spaces available for a skate park. It's not like the parking spaces are designated for, there's 3 only for the skate park, here's 62 for the sports field. It's considered to be a joint use parking lot, I guess you could say. And one of the concerns raised was Azalea Field and how that park was approved with so many parking spaces. And the commenter was correct that there's a lot more parking spaces out there in Azalea Field. And that parking study at that time looked at the sports field, which is very similar to the proposed sports field. That it was a worst case scenario where 2 teams would be playing and the next 2 teams would arrive. And so you have to account for 4 teams at once. And they found at that time that 60 parking spaces were required. So this proposal, this parking study found that 62 were required, so very similar. Sports fields are very similar. The difference is Azalea Field they provided an additional 40 parking spaces for the dog park use and 20 spaces for trail park users. Rassekh Park, the proposed park, doesn't include a dog park or trail connectivity. It just has a skate park and the sport and the playground. So that's really the difference between the 2 parks. This one doesn't have a dog park or trails connected. That's why it has a lot less parking spaces. And I think that should go over everything that hopefully.
Well, thank you. So Staff stands by its original recommendation that the parking proposed for this development satisfies the criteria that are required.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, we can proceed, may we proceed to deliberation?
One just item, Mr. Chair, sorry. Does the applicant wish to submit final written argument which would delay the commission's deliberation? No. You may proceed to deliberation, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any who are participating in the vote, any thoughts on acting on this application before us? Jeff?
I'm not going to look over across the room because I know this will create some ire. I think we're wrongly headed here. I know that every project stands on its own merits by the rules. Stafford Road has Azalea, has Lake Ridge, has a new Lake Ridge JV field, has a new aquatic center and rec center. Rassekh Park, I've always been for it as a park. We're going to have a traffic improvement from Walker's Corners to Childs Road on Stafford, which is the county. And there's going to be a freeway. It might go to a toll road, and that's state and county. I think that government, as our leadership, should have an overall traffic study for this area. I think it's wrong. I was a little worried about the parking, but after rereading it and seeing that it was Brent Aaron who wrote it, who used to be chairman of this organization,
Yes.
I know it's right. So I'm not worried about the parking. But the impacts to Stafford, I think all these projects put together, it's wrong. I think if they had an overall traffic study with the county that says, yeah, this is what it's going to be, the roundabout can handle it, and we don't know, heck, the improvements to Childs Road may help Stafford. We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be better or worse. Our traffic study takes us north of the roundabout, and I really think we, as a community, both the city and the county, should be looking at this overall rather than this little project and that little project and this little project, and with the idea of, oh yeah, then we'll deal with it later. I don't know if that's the right thought process. That's the thought that really bothers me. And the other thing that really bothers me is the lack of a sidewalk at Overlook in Stafford to the south. If we're expecting people to walk there, we can't have that wide a sidewalk on Stafford Road for you to walk on. You just can't have that. Now, I know that's outside of this project, but we're anticipating people are going to walk there, and it's just not, big enough. And I don't see where that is a huge problem with right-of-way. Maybe the right-of-way stops, but we should be able to talk to the owner on that and get that 70, no, it's not even that, 50 feet rectified so we can have a safe walking area for the people coming there. I know, again, this is outside the boundaries of the park, but we're expecting people to walk there. But the only way to walk there is they'd have to leave Lake Ridge and either cut through the fields and cut through the church and cut through the Stafford Retirement Center, or go all the way up and around to Atherton and come down the hill, which nobody's going to do. So if you're going to walk between them, you're taking your life in your hands. I don't like that. I think it's foolish as a community that we allow that. So those are my thoughts. I'm not against the park, but I do think we need to understand the impacts of all these projects on Stafford.
No, I appreciate your comments, and I think some of us have felt frustrated in the past with kind of the piecemeal approach we take to evaluating traffic impacts of development, seemingly viewing it in isolation. Are there any other thoughts along that line? I wanted to ask our staff if they could kind of address that point about, which we raised at the July 7th hearing, about our frustration at not having an overall traffic study of this area.
I'll refer to our traffic engineer on that one.
Evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Will Farley, City Traffic Engineer.
Criteria. Oh, I just lost it.
For the traffic study. So traffic studies typically look at the impacts for a specific development. It's how it's weighed. For this development, we looked at Rassekh Park. We did include what are considered in-process trips, which no other development that was seen to impact traffic or add traffic to the system was identified nearby, except for Lorac, which has not been approved yet and typically would not be included in the traffic study. But we instructed the applicant to go ahead and include the projected the traffic impacts from the aquatic center into the Rassekh Park study. The Child's Road project that includes Stafford south of the roundabout doesn't have any expected traffic impacts at this time. It's going through the design process. We don't know what's going to happen with that project. They were considering roundabouts and traffic signals at the time for Child's Road. They didn't know what they're going to do with Johnson Road. There was no real idea of what impact that would have. As for other projects, such as the I-205 tolling, they're still going through their environmental assessment. So they don't know what their impacts are going to be. It's all, there's no real defined answers of what's going to happen. So we have to look at what we know is out there, look at existing conditions, what we know is going on, forecast what's going to happen at the year of this project's completion, and then look at the specific impact for this project in the traffic study. And that's how the criteria is weighed. For an overall study of the Stafford, you're in a tough line between Clackamas County and the city of Lake Oswego. It's hard to say who wants to put forth the funding on a full corridor analysis from, it starts in Wilsonville, Stafford starts in Wilsonville and ends right at South Shore. The city is analyzing our portion north of the roundabout, and the county is looking at their area from basically the bridge over the Tualatin River to the south of the roundabout. I don't know what's going to come in the future. Maybe there is a future study of it. It's hard to say. But the application in front of us is Rassekh Park and its specific impacts.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And the reason the Commissioner recognized me, as I indicated to the Commission at the last meeting, the standard I think we're looking at here is 50070035. That's conditions on development, because that addresses mitigating impacts on development. This standard is applicable to whether the applicant is a public body or a private body. A private body would not be, I don't think anybody would expect a private body to conduct a regional traffic study. The language in subsection 5A3, the condition is reasonably related to alleviating a need for public services or facilities created or contributed to by the proposed development. As used in this section, public services or facilities includes ... streets, sidewalks, and pathways. That's the text language that you're looking at.
So, question for you. Does that mean not the sidewalk at Overlook and Stafford?
No, I think if you find that if you find there's substantial evidence in the record, that's always the test, that it is creating additional pedestrian demand coming from that area, it doesn't have to be located just on site. Okay? So if you, in order to mitigate the impacts to the sidewalk intensity of use, it would have to address a widening of the sidewalk. That's something you could consider.
As a condition of approval.
Yes, as a condition of approval.
Excuse me, Chairman, one more question. Evan, are you expecting people to walk from south of, say, Sunny Hill or from Lake Ridge in that area down Stafford to get to the park?
I think which Evan are you talking to?
He's talking to me.
I'm talking Evan Fransted.
I need to pull
Or
the map.
Will, either one.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right, does that help?
yeah,
The required public improvements with the paved asphalt pathway along Stafford, intended for people to walk along Stafford there. I mean, there's a pedestrian connection that connects to Ridge Point Drive. But those are the two pedestrian routes as part of this project.
Ridge Point Drive. Are you saying the dirt road?
Work?
So you're saying that people will not come,
Pathway I'm talking about is this pathway.
so you're going to say people are going to come from the development down there rather than down Stafford?
I guess I can't say no one's going to walk from the south, but those are the intended pedestrian connections to the site,
You understand what I'm talking about?
south of the site.
Yeah, up at overlooking Stafford.
Oh, overlooking Stafford, I'm sorry, I guess I don't.
There's no sidewalk there. Well,
You're
there's
talking
a
about up here.
side path there. I would say it's not wide enough. That's not necessarily something we need to improve. You're not expecting people to walk from Lake Ridge or from south of that intersection down there to,
Public improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So currently, there isn't a sidewalk south of Overlook on the west side of Stafford. That is a known missing point, and the city has recognized that. There is no current project that the city has to replace that piece. It would probably need to become a public improvement through the city's capital improvement plan, maybe be identified in the transportation system plan to get something in there. It's difficult to construct an improvement off the site of a project unless there is, and Evan Boone can probably help me out on nexus and proportionality, the Nolan, Dolan, and Kuntz. There is a pedestrian route on the east side of Stafford that goes down to the roundabout. So the option for people to cross it, overlook at the signal, walk to the south, and then cross back is available, as well as the new pedestrian connection to Ridge Point Drive that was shown in the application. So there are multiple ways to get to the site. But we do understand that there is a missing sidewalk in that location.
I think that the Nolan requires there to be a relationship between the mitigation requirement and the impact of the development. Okay, that's Nolan. Dolan requires that mitigation be roughly proportional to its impact. Okay, so that's what Nolan Dolan is. So I think the question is whether there is an increased intensity which would result in additional pedestrian traffic to cause the current sidewalk system to deteriorate such that an improvement would be necessary in order to maintain the service level, if you will, of the sidewalk system in the area.
Question on that. Of the sidewalk, the physical structure itself, or the safety of the pedestrians?
Well, I don't think anybody would, well, I'm not suggesting there's enough people there that would cause the sidewalk to deteriorate itself. I mean, how many souls go on this sidewalk? But whether the, again, whether the, and the safety, putting more people on the sidewalk is not going to change the safety level, okay? So I suppose the question is, it's kind of like an access standard, whether you have one car going out or whether you have 100 of them, every time the car is at the access point, you have to make the decision, okay? So really the safety level is the same. So I suppose the question is whether the current sidewalk system is inadequate to handle the flow of projected pedestrians there.
Yes.
So maybe instead of 1 by 1, maybe you're walking 3 by 3, and that creates a inadequate sidewalk width to handle it. If the solution is sidewalk width, then that's what you're looking at is capacity.
Kirk, did you have a comment?
Evan Boone. I thought Commissioner Shear's question was related to a traffic study, and then there was a reference to our code, which is, I guess, a nexus analysis under Nolan Dolan, and then we went to pathways. So I guess I got a little bit confused because the initial question was, how, if we're trying to look at traffic in this specific area, then we went to almost to a regional analysis as who's going to pay for it. And then, so I got a little confused how we went from a traffic study on all the city projects to our code section, which I thought was like an annexus proportionality kind of analysis, to now we're talking about 3 abreast on the pathways. I guess I got lost in that, kind of like those transitions.
Well, certainly, as I understand it, his question was twofold, 2 separate things. One, the traffic on Stafford, vehicle traffic on Stafford, and that gets into the traffic study, and whether the number of projects are creating, you can speak for yourself, but the number of projects are creating a need to expand or address vehicle capacity on Stafford.
Yes.
And separately, you raised the question about whether, if pedestrians are coming from the north in that intersection of Overlook and Stafford, whether the west sidewalk is adequate, and if not, what that means relative to this. Mr. Smith, I was addressing on the first issue, I was addressing the vehicle traffic study question. Commissioner Scheer was saying, well, let's look at all of the impacts that all of the projects that are in the pipeline, pros and cons, okay, are going to have Stafford.
I guess my point is, it's not that grandiose. I'm just saying, if you're going to put all these projects on from Atherton to the cemetery, pardon me, and then you're adding changes down here at Stafford, I'm just thinking you should be thinking overall that corridor, what's happening there between there and Grimm's. That's what I'm saying, and I'm just thinking that makes sense to me. Now I understand each project stands by itself, but if you're talking insurance, you're stacking them, and I don't know that I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not saying it's horrible. I'm saying we don't know. That's what I don't like. You can do a traffic study and find out, yeah, that's no impact at all. There's no big deal. Okay, great, fine, no problem. But that's what I'm saying. It just doesn't, I don't like how we do these things and have problems later. Second question is, we were talking in the presentation about people walking here, coming here, and Evan Fransted, if I could get you to use your pointer so we can see where I'm talking about. It's outside the boundaries of the parking of the project, but it's up at the corner on the west side of Stafford at Overlook. There you go. Right, over, right on Stafford, right there. You have a wide sidewalk and it goes to nothing. So all I'm saying is, if you're gonna expect all these people coming to that park, shouldn't you fix the sidewalk? And what I'm hearing is it's outside the purviews of this project, and it would have to be a city, you know, a different city project to make this happen. But I guess it worries me, and it makes sense to me that that be fixed either on this project or the project, one of the other projects along there, if you're expecting kids to be walking to the park. That's all I'm saying. And I guess I can't bring that up, is what I'm understanding.
Well, again,
I understand what you're saying.
okay, right.
You're very nicely saying it's out of bounds.
Well, what I'm saying, the code criteria is to look at the development. That's number
Well,
one.
the presentation was people will walk to it,
Okay,
and I don't think it's reasonable to expect kids to cross the street, come down, clear to Stafford, cross it back, and then go into the park. I wouldn't if I was a kid.
and I'm not arguing that
No,
point.
I know.
Okay.
I know
So
you're.
if the evidence relates to that development, okay, that's the nexus question, okay? Then the next question is that requirement roughly proportional? And then you look at, well, what is the impact? How many pedestrians are we talking about, and what are we requiring to do? You know, if there was, let's just say hypothetically, if there was one additional pedestrian, the rough proportionality question would be, do we have the constitutional authority to impose a requirement to finish, and I'm going to just 50 feet of sidewalk for that one additional pedestrian? That may exceed rough proportionality, but it may be related. It may be nexus. There may be the relationship to address pedestrian thing. That's fine, but it may exceed rough proportionality. So both of those have to be considered.
Yeah, but if your 15-year-old kids get hits there, okay. But that's all I'm saying. It just, these things, when I think about it, it doesn't make sense to me. That's all.
I would just add a comment on the sidewalk there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Boone, but it seems that a condition such that the city must complete that portion of sidewalk that Commissioner Sherrow is referring to would potentially be a condition reasonably related to the alleviation of a need for public services or facilities, being the sidewalk, that are created or contributed to by this proposed development. So that would not be outside of the scope of this project.
Right. If the evidence shows that there's pedestrian traffic, that's the nexus, then yes, it's related to the development. And then the next question is whether or not that requirement is roughly proportional to that. And that's in the commission's judgment.
And we don't have any estimate of the increased foot traffic from that direction?
In the record.
Well, I can't speak for the engineering department directly, but what they found when they did the nexus and proportionality analysis was that 12 feet of right-of-way dedication was required along the Stafford Road. That was one thing. And the existing pathway and new 12-foot wide asphalt pathway were required based on the proposed impacts to the system. They didn't find that a new sidewalk north of the site was required.
So I think our staff acknowledged that part of the sidewalk up north on the west side was inadequate. Is that a 50-foot strip of sidewalk we're talking about, or can you show me or tell me, quantify what we're saying in terms of the inadequacy of the sidewalk?
So as I understood it, it's about from the very corner where the pedestrian button is for the signal to the south side of the property, I believe is about 90 to 100 feet. There is a separated asphalt pathway, I believe in the front of the next property, that swings up into the bike lane.
And is there then an asphalt connection down to the Rassekh property?
There is an separated asphalt pathway from there to the park property. For the right-of-way, I am not sure what is available outside of the bike lane. There's some trees and some vegetation along the site. I have not looked at what would need to be done cost-wise or engineering-wise to make that connection.
I see. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments about this application or about the sidewalk or traffic study issues? Kirk?
So are we still in deliberations? Okay. So when I reviewed the tape from July 7th, and then I actually went out and looked at the sites, surprise, surprise. But what struck me was I was thinking this is supposed to be a park and then a skate park. And I was trying to figure out how the skateboarders were going to get there. Because I would not walk along this part of the highway because a person would take their life in their hands. Now, I understand that there's a separated pathway, but I was thinking what I know about skateboarders, it's going to be dangerous. And so I just didn't think that there was enough facilities to deal with going to the park and skateboards. And then the other thing that struck me, and I know that we're supposed to silo applications, but in looking at the golf course, I noticed that the golf course in Lorac, they're on one of my exhibits for the trees, they're together. I mean, because I'm going to ask a question later on about some trees, and it looked, apparently, I can't figure out where the trees went. I'm wondering if it's part of the aquatic center, but because it's right next to each other, right? So to kind of to talk about what Commissioner Shear's talking about is we have this project, we have the aquatic center, we have the golf center, and so I think it's, you used the word I was thinking, piecemealing, that I get it that you're only supposed to look at the development and what you're going to put on the applicant. I mean, realistically, the applicant's the city. So, I mean, you know, it's like, what is the city going to put on itself in order to have a safe park, right? Because Commissioner Shear's comment was, you know, well, what happens when, God forbid, a 15-year-old skateboarder gets run over by, because I sat there and watched the traffic going around the roundabout and going along Stafford, and I was surprised, you know, I was surprised how much traffic there was there, only to hear on the tape, well, you only need to look at the nexus of the impacts of this one project. And I was not persuaded in as much as if you're doing I'm going to use an example. I know it's not this project, but I'm going to use it as an example. If you're looking at a regional shopping center, you're going to look at the impacts of the regional shopping center. You are not going to look at whether or not the IHOP, when they make their application, you know, how many additional traffic the people eating pancakes are going to have. I mean, you're going to look at the regional impacts. And so if the city wants to put the aquatic center there to redo the golf, to do the park and the skateboard and all the other great things that they want to do in this area, then why wouldn't you do a traffic impact study of all these projects together? I mean, I just thought that was a reasonable request as opposed to siloing it. I mean, because theoretically, I mean, that just didn't make sense to me. So I think that we owe it to our citizens to do that so that unfortunately, so we don't see the red lights and the blue lights in which unfortunately somebody was hurt because of, you know, we don't want that versus, you know, well, we're only under the code, it's supposed to look under the specific project, and under the nexus analysis, you're only supposed to I think we need to get past that and look at what's best for our community, if we're gonna do this community development from my perspective, so.
Thank you for those comments. Staff, what exactly was encompassed in the traffic study for this Rassekh Park project? Did I understand you to say you took into account Laura and the golf course and Rassekh?
Correct. The traffic study for Rassekh Park reviewed two different scenarios. One, if Rassekh Park was constructed on its own, and two, what happens if Rassekh Park was constructed after the aquatic center. It reviewed both those future conditions, so it looked at both projects together.
And did that consider the golf course renovation project as well?
Correct.
So the traffic study was from the roundabout north.
Correct. It included the roundabout, Stafford Overlook, Burgess at Stafford, Sunny Hill in Stafford, South Shore at Stafford McVeigh, as well as Treetop and Overlook. All those intersections were analyzed in both studies under all the scenarios of what is it, just the park's impacts if nothing else was built in a couple years when it was completed, as well as what if LORAC and the golf course remodel came in before Rassekh Park was occupied.
And when was the study done? What time period?
I believe the study was completed in April of 2022 using data collected from February of 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask Will a question?
Sure.
Evan Boone, if I'm out of bounds with this question, because I don't remember it being in the record, tell me. As you pointed out, that there's a path connecting to Ridge Point Drive in Bellaterra and Bellaterra Drive. Is there anything we're doing there for neighborhood parking only signage or anything? Or is your intent to allow people going to the park to park there and cut through? Because that's a dead-end street.
There's no new signs required as part of this. No condition that requires that. There is already an existing pathway there. They're just basically maintaining what's already there.
Well, it used to be a driveway and it's overgrown.
Yeah, there's no signs required as part of this development.
Okay, that's all I asked.
Commissioners, are there other comments or questions of staff as we deliberate? Is there a motion anyone would like to make on this application? LU 21-0078 relating to the development on Rassekh Park. Well, I will move approval of LU 21-0078 relating to Rassekh Park with the conditions outlined in the staff report, recognizing the concerns we've expressed about, intuitively, it just seems like the traffic studies may not accommodate for the impacts of traffic in this area, and I have reservations that we're going to be looking back a couple or 3 years from now and recognizing that. But I thought the project itself did meet the criteria, as I understand it, with the conditions proposed, that there were generous walking paths. I appreciated the many natural features that were preserved at the site, the design of the athletic field space that had been maximized. There was some discussion that criticizing the outreach to the public, but I did feel that there was significant public outreach and comment that would satisfy any criteria. So I would make that motion subject to a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, let's call the roll, please.
Arthur,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
Shearer,
No.
Poinsett,
Yes.
Lyons,
Yes.
Dews.
What was the vote, Iris? Was it 4-2?
Yes.
All right, this
Very
is a
good.
tentative decision by the commission with written findings brought back to the commission at its next meeting on August 1st,
7 p.m.
7 p.m., and I won't be here.
Thank you, and I appreciate that good discussion. We will now proceed to the next public hearing on our agenda, LU 21-0076, relating to a golf course redesign at the municipal golf course. This relates to a conditional use modification to change the site to replace the existing 18-hole golf course with a 9-hole public golf course. We will review a permit for construction of a maintenance building. We will analyze the request for a minor variance to the maximum fence height to allow a 70-foot tall netting for the driving range and two 30-foot tall screen fences to the north of hole number 1 and to the southwest of the maintenance building. There is a resource protection district delineation and also calling for the removal of 160 trees. This site is located at 17525 Stafford Road, and Evan Fransted is the senior planner presenting this proposal. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and go through hearing procedure. for the
Please.
record. This land use request is to be considered based on the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria that staff identified as applicable. It was available online and from the planning department. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you specifically identify to the commission the criteria standards you're addressing so the commission may consider that testimony in relation to the criteria standards. If you do not identify the criteria standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issue to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise any constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Okay, the hearing process is as follows. There'll be a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant, up to 20 minutes, then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and lastly, testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations are allowed 10 minutes. Following that's the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following the deliberation. Now, the time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of which a part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed that persons are testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of written materials was noon today. No new written materials may be submitted to the commission tonight. Any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence by requesting a continuation of the public hearing. A potential conflict of interest is declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC member does not have a known present or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It's possible that a future business relationship could arise the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally or through relatives defined in ORS 244020. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, financial conflicts of interest, and please state your business or employment. Commissioner Dews.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is John Dews. I am an architect. I have not visited the site specifically for this project. I have had no ex parte contacts, nor do I have any bias associated with this development, and no financial conflict.
Mr. Poinsett. Mr. Poinsett.
My name is Bruce Poinsett, occupational safety consultant, construction. Have not visited the site, had no ex parte contacts, no biases, and no financial conflict or interest.
Thank you. I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney with the Bullivan Hauser Bailey Law Firm in their Portland office. I have been on this site, but I've not made a specific site visit relating to this application. I have no financial interest or no disqualifying bias. I've had no ex parte contacts. I did receive a list of names to run through my law firm's conflicts system. And to the extent PBS Engineering and Environmental, Inc. is involved in this project, I found that they are a co-defendant in a matter being handled by our Seattle office relating to an asbestos claim. And they're also a party listed as adverse to our client in a Portland matter relating again to an asbestos claim. And I have no financial benefit from those matters. I'm not working on them. They don't relate to this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kirk Smith. I'm a real estate land use attorney with the law firm of Buckhalter. And the city provided me with a list of names, and I ran it through our conflict system, and I did not have any conflict. Our firm doesn't have any conflict with any of the parties or the consultants. I have visited the site specifically for this application. I have no ex parte contacts, no bias, and no additional financial conflicts of interest.
My name is Tim Lyons. I am an attorney with McDowell, Rackner, and Gibson. I have driven past the site numerous occasions, but have not visited the site. I have not had any other ex parte contacts and have no bias for or against this project and no financial conflicts of interest.
My name's Jeff Shear. I'm a retired contractor. I've visited the site, but not specifically for this. I've had no ex parte conflicts, I have no bias, and I have no conflicts of interest.
Okay, thank you. Is there any challenge to Commissioner's right to consider the proceeding? Hearing none, Senior Planner Evan Fransted with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone and members of the commission. Before I give my summary of the staff report, I'd like to go over the DRC memo that was sent out late this afternoon. As discussed in the memo, we received 7 additional public comments after the staff report was published on July 8th. Those include 2 comments in support. Those are exhibits G100 and G101. And we received 5 public testimonies in opposition. Those are G201 through G205. The issues that were raised, or concerns raised, exhibits G101 and G204 raised potential drainage issues and tree removal north of hole 1, which I'll discuss in my presentation. Also, G201, 202, and 205 raised issues potentially with the proposed pedestrian pathway. This pathway is proposed as part of the Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center, LORAC. It's not part of this project. However, there is a condition of approval as part of this project that if LORAC is not approved, that pathway is constructed. That's in order to meet the pedestrian connection requirement, the pedestrian connections between proposed development and existing development on adjacent properties, other than connections via the street system, shall be identified and implemented where feasible. As I outlined in my memo, the applicants show that the pathway is feasible. So I think it's very difficult to make the finding that the pathway isn't feasible and remove that condition. So staff recommends keeping the condition as part of the approval. And then moving on, tree removal for tree removal, some of the tree removals were actually requested to be removed from that condition. Those were trees 111 through 118. I'll show those later in my presentation. Those trees are in conjunction with a temporary construction access driveway to Overlook Drive. So they are part of this project. So those trees can be approved for this project. There will be a permanent driveway and parking lot that will be constructed as part of the LORAC project. But for construction of this project, the maintenance center, that driveway, the applicant says, needs to be constructed, and those trees are in the construction activity. And then traffic impacts. There raised issues that one commenter talked about using the facility for weddings, meetings, and special events. I could not find anywhere in the record where the applicant proposes to use the facilities for those kinds of uses. There's no code standards that were cited. Staff refers to the staff report, and engineering staff concurs with the applicant's traffic analysis and the findings. Therefore, staff analysis of the staff report correctly addresses the criteria after considering the evidence raised. And screening of fences, potential safety issues. So I'll show the fences that are proposed. And for the driving range and for the screening fences north of hole 1, no code was cited in the testimony. Mostly, I think there was concern raised about potential maintenance of the fence and whether the fences would be adequate in preventing balls from flying into people's backyards. And I'll show the fence. The screen fences are 30 feet tall. The fencing for the driving range is 75 feet tall, and there is sufficient distance from the abutting properties to the north that it should prevent that. I'll also let the applicant go over some of that in their presentation. They have more information. So that concludes the memo. All right, so now a summary of the staff report. So the site location, the site is approximately 38.51 acres with frontage on Stafford Road, a minor arterial street, Overlook Drive, a neighborhood collector, and Banyan Lane, a local street. The site is zoned P&A for parks and natural area. Properties to the north are zoned R10 and developed with residential dwellings, and zoned PF for public function and developed as Palisades Elementary School. Adjacent properties to the south across Overlook Drive is R7.5 zone and developed with the Carter House Historic Home. Properties to the east and southeast are zoned R10 and developed with Oswego Pioneer Cemetery and Sacred Heart Cemetery. Properties across Stafford Road are developed with residential dwellings and Azalea Field Park and are zoned R10, R15, and P&A. Properties to the west are developed with Lake Ridge High School and residential dwellings, which are zoned PF and R7.5. Here's an aerial photo of the site. I'd like to note that the perimeter of the site, especially to the west and to the north, is lined with trees. These trees will remain as part of this project. And also you can see Lost Dog Creek there in the outline, and there's a pathway that goes across Lost Dog Creek that I'll talk about under sensitive lands. And here's some photos that I took last week from Banyan Lane just to show the trees that are along that street. So it's a line of trees. It's very difficult to see the interior of the site from that street, I think from other streets as well. Just to give you an idea of, it's a large site that's surrounded by trees. Is kind of my point with these photos. And as I mentioned, the site contains sensitive lands. There's a Class 2 Resource Protection District, RP District, with stream corridor and wetlands along Lost Dog Creek there, outlined in blue. So here's the site plan. So the proposed redesign of the golf course is from 18 holes to a 9-hole course, construction of a new maintenance building with parking lot, and extension of existing driving range, and fence screening. The applicant has also applied for development and review and conditional use permits on site for the Lake Oswego Recreation Aquatic Center, or also known as LORAC. As part of that project, the existing maintenance building will be demolished and the existing clubhouse will remain. The applicant performed a site study of the wetland boundary near Lost Dog Creek to determine the location of the wetlands and waterways within the RP district. The application proposed grading near hole 2 within the delineated RP district. The delineation report states regrading will remove non-native turf grass with no native vegetation removal. The proposed extension of the existing driving range is arrow to work. It's right there. So the existing driving range is about right here. They're going to extend it to the north. There's new screen fencing along the north of hole 1, and there's also screen fencing to the south of the maintenance building, right here to prevent baseballs from flying into the parking lot from the high school. The proposed pathway that I discussed in the memo is to the south of the maintenance building. So it connects Banyan and the intersection right here through the little bit of the golf course to the school property and into the parking lot that will eventually be built as part of the LORAC. So that pathway is part of the project of LORAC, and we reviewed at that time. Proposed maintenance building. Here's a site plan for the maintenance building. It includes a building which is 2,607 square feet, a parking lot with 6 parking spaces, a wash rack, and fuel tank structure. The proposed structures for the maintenance facility comply with the P&A dimensional standards for setbacks, maximum lot coverage, and maximum height. Here's the building plans. The proposed maintenance buildings, as you can see, is utilitarian in design with simple use and forms. The materials of the building are vertical corrugated metal siding, standing seam metal roof, steel roll-up service doors, aluminum storefront windows, and aluminum man doors. The siding and roll-up doors will be painted green. The roof will be gray. The building design standards require buildings must be designed to be complementary in appearance to adjacent buildings of good design in regards to materials, setbacks, roof lines, height, and overall proportions. The applicant conducted a study of photos of adjacent buildings of good design that are accessory structures of similar type as the proposed maintenance building. The only applicable adjacent structures of good design are the hitting bar and the weight room shown in the photos above, located on abutting Lake Ridge High School property. The proposed maintenance building is typical design of a service building, especially associated with the athletic field or golf course in terms of scale and massing with single-story pitched roof, metal pitched roof, metal materials, and is complementary to the utilitarian design of the hitting barn and weight room buildings. The building design standards also require, where existing buildings are to remain on site, new development shall be designed to integrate the remaining buildings into the overall design, or provide a separate landscaping, remodeling, or other treatment which establishes a distinct character and function of the remaining buildings. The existing clubhouse building shown in the photo here above will remain on site. The narrative explains that the proposed maintenance building was designed to be complementary to the existing clubhouse, recognizing that in terms of good design, the new building is a maintenance building, accessory to the clubhouse, and is not intended for use by customers or the public. As the photo shows, the existing clubhouse is a single-story building with a pitched roof and relatively small footprint at 4,725 square feet. Likewise, the proposed maintenance building is a low stature structure with single-story pitched roof and small footprint at 2,607 square feet. Staff finds the proposed building is comparable in height and massing to the clubhouse building. Staff finds the proposed maintenance building integrates with the clubhouse into the overall design. That criterion is met. As for the fences that I referred to, the applicant has requested a minor variance to the fence standards to allow 75-foot tall netting for the driving range and 2 30-foot tall screen fences to the north of hole 1 and to the southwest of the maintenance yard. Staff finds that increased height of the proposed fences will not be detrimental to the public health or safety, as the fences will not be located within vision clearance for vehicles entering and exiting the site. Compliance with applicable fire and building regulations will be ensured at the time of building permit. Staff finds that the visual impact of the 3 fences will not be materially injurious to the abutting properties, An even lesser impact to the abutting properties within 300 feet of the site that are significantly farther away from the proposed fences. There will be little or no negative impact to the streetscape due to the insufficient distance and landscaping between the fences and sidewalk travel lane along Stafford Road, Overlook, and Banyan Lane. Staff finds that the materials submitted for the proposed variance to the maximum height of the fence meet the minor variance criteria and can be approved. So as you can see, the height is shown here. So this is for the driving range, and it shows the netting, so the poles, and this is all netting, 75 feet tall. And this is along the north section of it. The applicant's presentation will go into a little more detail about that. And on the right is the screening fence, so it includes 16 feet of chain link fence and then 14 feet of netting on top of that, designed to keep the balls in and out of the site. So depending on the north, it keep the balls in, and from the south, to keep the balls from the baseball field out. And here's the planning plan. So the site is so large, I'm sure you noticed, the tree removal plans and planning plans are 5 different sheets. So this is hole 1. As you can see, these are all new trees to the north that they're proposing. A lot of these are larger native trees that they'll plant. Moving along to the west, hole 2 and 3, and then give you an idea of the layout. So all those are new trees. And note the existing trees that will remain. These are the sensitive lands. These will all remain. 7 and 8, more trees. A lot of trees being planted. And that shows the boundary of the site with the Lorac building that is not part of this project. And as far as the conditional use, so this is a modification to a conditional use. A conditional use is an activity that is permitted in the zone, but which, because of some characteristics that are not entirely compatible with other uses in the zone, cannot be permitted outright. In order for a modification for conditional use to be approved for the proposed golf course alterations, maintenance building, lighting, and parking lot, it must be shown to meet these criteria. Staff finds the conditional use criteria were met because the P&A dimensional standards, including setbacks, maximum height, and lot coverage are met. For criterion 2, the site-specific standards are not applicable because the proposal is a park improvement that will not create additional motor or foot traffic on the surrounding neighborhood and is classified as a minor public facility. The site is physically capable of accommodating the proposed golf course, existing clubhouse building, driving range, and proposed maintenance building and parking lot. The functional characteristics of the proposed use are such that it can be made reasonably compatible with uses in the vicinity. A parking analysis was performed to determine the number of parking spaces for the proposed golf course redesign and maintenance building. A traffic impact analysis was performed to address potential traffic impacts. And as discussed under the parking and access standards, the proposal complies with all those standards. For lighting and noise, the proposed lighting includes a maintenance building lights and a single parking lot pole light, which are over 450 feet away from the residential properties to the west and southwest. The lighting plan shows that the lighting will not create glare or spill onto adjacent residential properties. The maintenance building plan shows that a small heat pump is proposed north of the building. The nearest residential use to the northwest is over 450 feet from the proposed maintenance building. At this distance, noise from the mechanical equipment will not impact adjacent residential uses. Also, the proposal is not expected to have any lighting or noise impact on the budding school uses. The golf course will operate during normal business hours and operations will remain on site. The proposed modifications to the golf course layout will continue to operate the same hours and functions as the existing golf course. Staff finds the proposed modifications to the conditional use permit meet the conditional use criteria. And then for tree removal, again, there's 5 sheets to this. I started in the north section. So here's the proposed parking lot and the clubhouse, existing clubhouse right there, and the driving range. As you can see, all the red are the trees proposed for removal. The applicant is requesting to remove 157 trees for redesign of the golf course, including grading and construction of the maintenance building, parking lot, and temporary construction access driveway to Overlook Drive. So that shows the driving range, hole number 1, and trees removed for the green on hole number 1. And there's 2, 3, and 4, and 5, 6 holes. There are tree stands that are identified. Here's one of them. Tree stands are proposed for removal. 7 and 8, and I'll go over more detail about some of the trees there. And here are the trees that are proposed for removal for the temporary access driveway. So this does say proposed recreation and aquatic center by others, but they are going to need to build a temporary access driveway for construction, and that's where these trees are located. And let me go back here. All right, the applicant will be applying for 18 trees with dead tree removal permit and 21 trees with invasive tree removal permit and 1 tree with a hazard permit separately from this application. Staff finds that all but one of the trees proposed for removal are within the area of the proposed development. The 1 tree that's not within the area of proposed development is tree 230 with a red arrow. That tree right there at the intersection. And here's a photo of the tree. Tree 230 is a 32-inch Doug fir. As shown on the plan, there is no grading or development activity near the tree. The proposed pathway that will be reviewed as part of the LORAC project is nearby, but there's insufficient evidence that the removal of the tree is in order to construct any proposed development as part of this project. The applicant provided an arborist report that states the removal of the trees will not have a significant negative impact on erosion, soil stability, or flow of surface waters because all on-site runoff will be managed with erosion control permit and stormwater system. No nearby trees will experience wind throw impacts because the trees lined along the property boundary are retained to maintain windbreaks for internally retained trees. Of the 157 trees proposed for removal, 54 trees are over 15 inches in diameter and in good or fair condition. Staff and the contract arborist conducted a site visit. We walked the site for about 4 hours and visually inspected each tree for removal. Staff finds that the trees proposed for removal are not rare in terms of size or species because other similar trees on site or in the neighborhood of similar size and species will be retained. Removal of most of the trees cannot be seen from the neighborhood, i.e. from public right-of-way or properties within 300 feet, and would not be tree removal significant to the neighborhood due to size, species, or distinctive character. Staff concurs with Albert's findings that the trees proposed for removal are not significant to the neighborhood due to size, species, or distinctive character. The trees proposed for removal do not involve any significant trees. The arborist report states that removal of the trees will not result in alterations to distinctive features or continuity of the neighborhood skyline because the trees are within the interior of the golf course, and large trees that define the neighborhood skyline will be retained. However, the arborist report notes trees 253, which is a 46-inch Douglas fir, and shown here in the blue, if I can get it. These 2 trees together in hole number 7. So it's tree 253, which is 46-inch Doug fir, and tree 254, which is 48-inch Doug fir, are large trees paired together that stand above the skyline due to their size and thus distinctive features of the skyline. Staff found that the tree 230 that I discussed previously is a prominently visible location on Banyan and Cloverleaf Road, and removal of the trees will result in a gap in the neighborhood skyline. Therefore, an exception to criterion 3 with alternatives to removal analysis is required for trees 230, 253, and 254. Also, the 3 stands of trees proposed for removal on the plans require the exception as well. Staff finds that the only feasible alternative to removal of the 3 stands of trees would be to realign or to reduce the length of yardage of holes 1, 4, 5, and 6. The arborist report explains that this is not an option for safety considerations, and in order to meet the USGA standards, basically allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone, staff finds there's no reasonable alternative to removal of these 3 stands of trees in order to construct the proposed redesign of the golf course. Trees 253 and 254, as I pointed out, are located on the south side of the fairway of hole 7. Arborist report details how alternatives to removal were considered, including moving hole 8 or shortening and moving hole 7 towards hole 5. Staff finds that both alternatives presented are not feasible, that would still allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone. However, there appears to be at least one other reasonable alternative that would permit the holes to be used as permitted in the zone. One alternative not discussed in the arborist report is to enlarge the green on hole 7 to the north. So if they made the green larger on hole 7, could a golfer tee off, have a clear sight to the green and get around those trees that would not require removal of those 2 large Douglas fir trees? That's the question. This would potentially largen the green would potentially allow a clear sight line around the trees from the tee box to a clear shot of larger green. The applicant's analysis did not identify any safety issues with enlarging the green, as the closest hole is the tee box on hole 5, which is approximately 96 feet from the proposed green on hole 7. The applicant has not shown why a reasonable alternative would not include enlarging the green. Also, no evidence was submitted regarding the impact of the sight line from the tee box to the green with the trees along the left side of the fairway. Due to lack of evidence, staff finds that removal of trees 253 and 254 does not meet the exception criteria. For the reasons outlined above, staff concludes that the removal of all the trees, except for trees 230, 253, and 254, comply with applicable criteria or exception. 154 trees are approved for removal, which includes 84 native trees. The planting plan shows 157 mitigation trees to be planted, which includes native trees such as big leaf maples, Oregon ash, and Oregon white oaks. Recommending condition of approval B5 requires the applicant to submit final planting plans that show the mitigation trees. And in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of LU 21-76, subject to conditions except for removal of trees 230, 253, and 254. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Evan, for reviewing that report on behalf of the staff. Commissioners, are there questions of the planning staff at this point? Kirk?
Yes, I was curious, when I went out and looked at the site today, I noticed that there were 3 trees that were, I presume if there's a yellow ribbon around it, that means they're proposed to be removed?
It should.
Okay. On your nice big first plate of your presentation, it shows the clubhouse.
Site plan?
No, you just,
The existing clubhouse?
yes, keep going. It's like, it was the first slide, I think.
That was the first.
Sorry, it's also on page 18.
Oh, there's a photo of the clubhouse.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So if you look at the clubhouse and then you look down, you see those trees right by the pathway. Those have yellow ribbons around them. And then I looked at my tree plan and I couldn't find them. And then I wondered, are those trees tagged for the aquatic center because there's a push out into?
Yeah, that's correct. They're proposed for removal with LORAC project, not as this project.
Okay, and when's LORAC coming before us, I guess?
August 15th. So they are, I believe the notice has gone out. No, the notice will be going out, and they are required to mark those trees in when that notice goes out. So they've probably already marked the trees for the notice of that project.
So is that when I asked the question about why there's a kind of like a push out for LORAC, or do I ask it for this question because I admit I'm not a golfer, but I would be surprised that the people will go from the clubhouse and then walk to the first tee box, which is number 1. They're not gonna like walk around that rectangle. So, I mean, I was trying to figure out how the projects fit together, and I guess why there's a push out when normally you would see a development that had a property line that would just go straight across as opposed to, so I was kind of like, what, as a real estate lawyer, I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on? But I guess, do I ask the question when LORAC comes out and find out why there's a push out?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
are the for this project, are the golfers going to be required to walk around that gray rectangle in order to get to the first tee box? Because it's not part of the golf course?
Well, it depends on the timing of the project and when the construction is complete, because obviously it's not open right now, and it depends, I don't know what the timing, I don't know if the timing of when the golf course will be finished versus the LORAC project. But to bring up the issue of why they're bumping out in there and why the trees need to be coming out, that's not being proposed as part of this application. You would address that as part of LORAC.
Okay, I've been an attorney too long. I did a deal in which you literally couldn't go from the tee box to the fairway without trespassing. And so that's why it kind of struck me that I don't know any golfers that can go from the clubhouse, walk around, and then they're just not going to do that. So it just struck me as kind of strange what's going on. But I guess I'll ask the strange what's going on when LORAC comes out, because from my perspective, the rectangle should be part of this application as opposed to that, but.
Yeah, I would defer to the applicants, ask them that after
Okay.
the presentation. I mean, there will be access to hole number 1. It's just not part of this project.
And
It
these
is
are,
all one site.
right, these are both owned by the city, and so it wouldn't really be trespassing. I mean, there's going to be connectivity between the two sites because they're, it's operated by the Parks Department.
Okay, I understand that, but it just struck me as those trees are tagged to come down, but they're not on the project that I'm looking at, so I was like, curious. So, all right, thanks.
Well, are we in this application being asked to make any decisions relating to the existing clubhouse?
The clubhouse will remain as is. There's, no changes to clubhouse.
So we're not being asked to make any
No.
opinion on the existing clubhouse. Any other questions for staff? Jeff?
Evan, a couple of questions. In reading the comments today, it dawned on me back here that I had a question of the drainage on the end of the driving range. Is that addressed in the stormwater? I read the comments. I thought about it at the time when I read it, and then I didn't go back and look at the stormwater plan.
So the staff report is very brief about the analysis of storm, because it's a feasibility. But it is shown on the stormwater plans. I'm sure the applicant can go in a lot more detail, but here's the plan.
Right.
The north section, and there's stormwater pipes and swales that are designed to manage the stormwater along the north there.
And maybe they'll touch on that.
Yes, sure they will.
You noted 75-foot high fence in the driving range. What is it now?
Not that section, I'll refer to the applicant too. I think they know.
Okay, I'll ask them that. And then, I'm just for the height, I'm just trying to get in my mind. And then, this shows access off Overlook. Did you say that's temporary?
For this project, yes, it's a temporary gravel construction driveway.
Okay, so will it always be temporary construction driveway?
No, as part of LORAC, they'll complete that driveway.
Okay, so then we ask those questions in August. Very good.
A question, excuse me, about the pathway. I think criteria C10 says that the expectation is that this pathway will be completed as part of the LORAC project. But if it is not completed as part of the LORAC project, it would be completed as part of this project. And I looked briefly at the code. Is that there's a requirement that if feasible, a pedestrian pathway shall be constructed? And so kind of the assumption is that will be constructed and that criteria will be satisfied through the other project, but if not, it'll be satisfied here.
Yeah, that's correct.
I guess just kind of a comment then that I'm just working through my mind is the Rassekh project, not to go back to that, but was, in my mind, clearly a standalone project. I've noticed in reading through the staff report on this project, there are at least 2 instances I saw, one being this pathway and one being the parking lot, where it's kind of dependent upon what happens with the LORAC project. So something running through my mind is, at what point do those interdependencies create strong enough relationship between the 2 projects that they should be viewed as one and the same? So that's just something that I'm kind of looking at, a framework for this project and the next.
Well, this development needs to meet to the criteria and standards, and a condition of approval can be imposed. I mean, they're showing we're going to meet these criteria by this future project. So that's, that's like a contingency, type of thing. So the question is, if that contingency doesn't work, what's the condition that's imposed in order to meet it? There needs to be access, there needs to be parking. So I think they've crafted, as I recall, conditions of approval have been crafted that says if the LORAC project doesn't go forward as shown in their drawings, then they would have to provide the alternative parking. And that's not unusual, I think, where we have property. Sometimes we have properties, I mean, in this case, it's same applicant, related parcels. Sometimes we have projects that are next to each other, particularly where you have reciprocal drive aisles or shared parking or something like that. So when you look at those, they may not come at the same time, but we have districts that required reciprocal access and that sort of thing. So what happens if the other, if the planned one doesn't work? They need to have a contingency plan, that sort of thing. So.
At what point then would there be such a connection between the 2 projects that it would trigger and require us to look at their cumulative impact for something like the traffic?
Well, I think that would be at the second one, because, I mean, you really are looking at, I don't know how you, is the traffic, I guess, each one is being looked at separately, and I suppose if they were at separate locations, they would have, their own individual traffic and parking demands. Now, because they're being combined, you might get some shared parking, some overlapping time things, and you might end up actually also having some reduced traffic because people go play golf and go to the LORAC, that sort of thing. But that analysis would occur in the second project you're looking at, because obviously if you have to, the first one has to stand alone. And then if the second one comes in, that might end up reducing the traffic and parking that's generated then by this one, by the first one. Okay, so I guess I would say it's similar to like a regional shopping center, where you have a new restaurant might come in. Well, it's got the regional shopping center and all tenants have their own demand. If this restaurant comes in, it would share its use and maybe reduce some traffic, but if it doesn't, it won't. And so the plan, here you should be looking at, is there either shown in plans or by clear and objective conditions of approval can be imposed to show that it will in fact meet its needs. When the second one comes in, to justify less parking than would be generated by that one, you'd say, well, I got this other one here and I'm showing how the times work on it, that sort of thing. So.
Here's maybe a foundational question then, and then I'll move on, but how do we know that they are, what makes them 2 separate projects? At some point, if they're on the same parcel or adjacent parcels, like if for example, you were building, you could build a tennis and golf center, but you could say, well, this is project A, a tennis center, and this is project B, a golf center, but for all practical purposes, that they're one project. Is it just because the applicant says, well, we consider these 2 projects?
I think it is up to the applicant. The applicant says, it files an application for the proposed use. So the applicant defines the proposed development. The question is that use permitted, on the zone? And then does that use meet all the criteria for it? If an applicant wants to do a joint project, and that's frankly easier for staff to deal with on it, because you're then looking at one time, the overlapping uses and impacts that those have. So it puts us, I mean, I agree, it's a strain on staff and the commission and the public to say, well, this is what happens under version A, but what happens, that's dependent on B, but what happens if it doesn't happen? So we have to kind of have the alternative standing by to make sure that if B doesn't happen, then A stands alone, because that decision's already been made. So that one should be a standalone decision. But I mean, it's kind of like, let's say I had a site that had enough room for 2 apartments, on one side. I think the applicant could say, I'm going to build 1 apartment building today, and I'll think about the next one tomorrow, type of thing. We can't force them to do that.
Thank you for those questions. Are there other questions of staff before we get into testimony? I just wanted to clarify. So I understand that the parking study for the 9-hole golf course modification demonstrated a need or average usage of 77 parking spaces at a peak time. However, apparently there are 97 parking places. Is it your anticipation that the 77 parking space requirement at a peak time will change when the LoRa decision comes, application comes before us? Are we going to be asked to readjust that, or is that 77 spaces locked in on this golf course modification proposal?
Yeah, the parking study includes LoRac in there, so they looked at both uses. So because we're just looking at the golf course now, it's just 77. In August, you look at both of them.
So when we get to LoRa, we'll decide if 103 spaces are sufficient for this site?
Right, and if for some reason LoRac's not approved, then they need to adjust their parking to only have 77 spaces.
Okay, any other questions? Why don't we go into testimony of the applicant? Please identify yourself and state your affiliation.
See if I get this right. Okay. I'm Ken Reams, civil engineer for PBS Engineering Environmental, and we have a few other people, the team here. I'd just like to briefly introduce. And Bruce Powers is the project manager for Parks and Rec. Ted Scrivener is the project manager for Milroy Golf Systems, a contractor who's been building golf courses since '97. Troy Mears is a local in the actual area of the golf course, lives there. He's the landscape architect and the irrigation designer. Oliver Brandt, next to me, is representing the architect for the maintenance building with Polymath Studio. We had a consultant for community engagement, public involvement, if you will, Barney and Worth. They're not here. And then Dan Hickson, who's the golf course designer from Dan Hickson Golf and Design. If you know golf, then you know that he designed abandoned crossings down there along the coast, which was pretty ranked high back in, I think it was 2007. So anyways, that's kind of the introduction to our team. They're here. So with that, let's see if I can operate this here. So I'd like to briefly kind of go through the project background and purpose, the community engagement briefly, the overview of the project, then we'll go into the design in a little bit more detail, and I'll hand it off to Oliver and Dan when we get to the maintenance building and golf course. So, and some of this I'll try not to repeat. I know Evan's done a great job of covering a lot of it, so I think you know where the location of the golf course is at. It was opened in 1964 with a small clubhouse and driving range. The clubhouse was replaced in '92. It's currently an 18-hole golf course, par 3 course. This was part of the Parks 2019 Parks and Bond program that was approved by voters. The purpose is to design and construct the 9-hole executive golf course that appeals to all ages and all levels of play. So there's a challenge there, and that's what Dan has done. The second is to renovate and extend the driving range, we know, and then the third is to construct the maintenance facility. Construction is expected to start early next year. In the community engagement, we pretty much, they started in early 2021, and when the web page was developed. Since 2021, pretty much everything, we've had 2 technical advisory committee meetings, an official neighborhood meeting, a community meeting, and held an online open house. As a matter of fact, on the second TAC meeting, the technical advisory committee, we waited in between the first and the second to get a little bit more support and input from the public. So we took a little bit more time to get that, so we got more feedback. The public has been weighing in with the comments through the online open house calls, emails since May of 2021, and these have been shared with the team regularly. During the discussion of the planning and the design, the city's met with some of the residents to discuss their concerns, particularly with the northerly neighborhood up there. Design changes and refinements have occurred along the way, and the results are what you see in the plans. So I'll go into the project overview. This is a high level, but the driving range, as Evans mentioned, will be extending it to the north. We're replacing the poles and netting. They're both in poor condition today. Reinstalling the existing lighting on the new poles near the same location and the same height. And we're improving stormwater management as part of the drive range. Maintenance facility is located on the south end of the property, which Evans pointed to, adjacent to the high school baseball field. Constructing a new, maintenance building, that'll accommodate staff parking, and the landscaping around that will be part of the LORAC project, based on the project limits line. The golf course, as I mentioned, it appeals to all age groups. There'll be new fairways, tees, greens, adding a chipping green, constructing a larger putting green, removing and replanting trees throughout the course, and impacting a small portion of the wetland along the creek, but we're enhancing the downgraded existing wetlands at a 3-to-1 ratio for mitigation. And lastly, just one thing on the traffic and parking. From the TIA that we did, the traffic impact analysis, the existing traffic and parking will stand alone based on the existing parking and access off of Stafford as it is today. There's sufficient parking if the LORAC was not to happen. The parking is there, the access is there. It would be like operating 2 years ago pre-COVID. And so there's sufficient space and access for that. Because the new golf course is not expected to increase the traffic, perhaps even a little bit less, based on it being a 9-hole course. So here's the site plan you've kind of seen already. I kind of go into the driving range. So the range will be extended from about 208 yards to 258 yards. It'll be about 59 feet from the property line. The blue line up there, blue line there is the existing fence as it is today, with the, I think it's the property line over there to the red. So 208 yards as it is today. And then the proposed driving range, again, extending it to 258 yards. You can see the difference right here from where the new drive range will end and where it is to the property line. And this, I know you can't read it, it's about 59 feet. Again, already talked about enough about the poles. The sides, again, will be maintained at 65 feet high. The end will increase from 50 to 75 feet, which is 50% higher. So it accommodates the longer range drivers today that are used, and makes it much better than it has been there for years. Mentioned the 30-foot screen fencing, and that's about 210 feet long. It'll be installed west of the driving range behind holes 1 and 5 on the golf course side. And so as far as the grading and stormwater, this is a map exhibit, I guess I prepared a little while ago. So it's a little detailed, but it shows existing contours, proposed contours, and there have been concerns we've heard from the neighborhood throughout the project. What we're doing, there's an existing area drain right here that will be removed, and the new drive range extension will be along here, we will be constructing a 2 to 4 foot high berm in this dark green area. And in front of that will be, in blue, will be a swale that pretty much collects the water, the runoff from the driving range, all this down here, and then most of this on the new hole 1 will be all collected. And there's 3 area drains in fluorescent green, you can see if you look close enough. Those 3 will capture the runoff, and it will go into the existing system, which is this orange line, and it goes all the way down and it discharges down here at Lost Dog Creek. So the improvements are there to capture a lot of that runoff compared to where it was today. The berm will be about 345 feet long. You can kind of see up there, and then the swale is about 270 feet long. So I think, so with this, if you can read into it, there will be less runoff that will be coming from the golf course that will go to the neighborhood to the north. It's pretty clear because the new berm right here, that's kind of a dividing line, if you will. Any rain that hits on the outside of it goes to the north. Anything in the south will be collected in here, what I just talked about on the swale in the system. The existing lighting on the drive range, again, will be removed and reinstalled on the new poles. So there's no increased light pollution. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Oliver here.
Sure. Thanks. So the new maintenance facility is, well, Evan stole a lot of my thunder, but it's about 3,200 square feet. The overall facility itself is about 11,000 square feet. It will consist of, how's this little pointer work here? There we go. So the maintenance facility itself, as Evan noted, has roll-up doors. It has corrugated siding. It has an exterior portion for the storage of golf carts. The site itself has 6 parking spots, 1 of which will be accessible, fuel and material storage, and a wash rack for cleaning all of the golf course maintenance equipment. The enclosed areas of the maintenance facility will include a barn, a barn for the storage of all of the equipment that the golf course currently uses, as well as a modest shop for maintaining that equipment, and a small staff area and a bathroom. I think that's about it. It's a pretty simple building.
Okay, Dan, you're on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Hickson, Hickson Golf Design. A lot of the stuff that I was going to present has already been talked about. So I'll kind of work my way through this list that's not there. And part of the original design criteria was to obviously go from 18 to 9 holes. The USGA, in order to have a handicap, requires about 15, or not about, it requires a minimum of 1,500 yards. In order to do that. I think our scorecard right there is a little bit off from the 7th hole had been modified previous to that, and I believe it's a little shorter. And I think we're just in the 1,580 range right now for total yardage. And the USGA for handicapping requires that. And so that was one of the early design criteria, that we would, residents could have a handicap where the existing course set does not happen. We also wanted a difference between, I don't want to get into any gender problems here, but men's and ladies' tees, which would also be for, the forward tee has to be that 1,500 too for junior golfers and female golfers to have a handicap, yet still provide a little bit longer course. And so the decision today that Evan mentioned there for the tree 52, 253 and 254, we'll modify that farther in order to create something safe. We'll probably be right on that border of 1,500. I got off my list there, but we want to improve every part of it, tees, greens, fairways, better turf grass, again, irrigation and drainage. And much of the tree removal is to let a lot more airflow and sunlight, and to decrease the amount of root encroachment. The golf course, as Evan said, is a big site, but I did a project recently on 144,000 acres, so it feels like a tiny site to me. And it has 560 some trees on it, and so, which is, it's more forest-like than ideal for golf. And so a lot of the tree removal is to address that and to grow better turf. Heavy tree, shade, leaves, all that stuff in no way improve turf, and they usually decrease it. And so that's one of the problems on today's golf course out there is you hit a ball in the trees and it's in the dirt, and the trees are so heavy you're just simply kind of knocking it a little bit out into play and then playing on. The driving range, and as Evan said, and Ken, we're trying to make it to appeal for everyone. You know, we're not trying to make a championship quality or style golf course. We just don't have the room for that, but we do want it to be where, you know, as it has been for many years, but in an approved state of first rounds of golf for people and generational groups going out there from grandparents right down to beginning golfing children. Of course, we want to make it more fun and challenging. The existing course, if you're non-golfers, the green complexes are just simply pushed up little mounds of dirt that the ball tends to run off, and we would build it in such a way that the maintenance could be improved without an increase in the maintenance budget, but just better mowing and easier to maintain. And a little bit of the discussions on some of those trees. We've had several meetings about the kind of the interface from the LORAC to the golf course and sort of opening that. This gentleman mentioned the two trees out in front. And part of my goal on this whole project is to create a much more beautiful landscape. When you walk out into that area that you're talking about, is to be able to actually see out on the course. And today's, it's, in my opinion, as a golf course designer, it's pretty overplanted there, and you simply walk and see a bunch of not necessarily great looking trees that are blocking the view down into this, you know, beautiful piece of property of the golf course. I think will end up being on 30 some acres. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Let's see, am I back on? Yeah, so looks like we have 6 minutes. I'm not going to take all 6 minutes, but there's two additional things I wanted to mention. One is on the driving range. We'll be regrading that in there with some of the soil that's being moved around on the golf course, and so you'll be able to see a lot more targeted greens, if you will. Is that the right way to call it?
The ground currently just kind of curves away from you, and you really don't see the ball land farther down. And so we'll build some new target greens, just small areas, so that the golfers kind of have an idea to aim at something and then to be able to visually see it land, as opposed to, you know, hitting it over the landscape.
And then the last thing I wanted to say is I've been part of the coordination with the LORAC team as well. And there's been a lot of coordination along the boundary lines everywhere where the trees are at, where you were talking, Commissioner, you're talking about the trees near the hole number 1. You will see that that is part of the LORAC design, but it's an elevated area, so they'll be having a lot more information for you on that. But you can walk around that. Dan, probably more familiar than I am, but that's been coordinated quite a bit, all the grading along the project limits line. So I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, could you show me on that, or point out on this map if this is the best, where the current holes 15 and 16 are?
Let me think here.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we had any.
15 and 16 go behind the driving range. Go back to that drawing. And the 15th hole, that's right, isn't it, Jeff? Yeah. 15 goes east. Basically, here, I'll take the pointer. Not sure if I know how to use it.
Top one.
This guy, okay.
Yeah, hold it down. There you go.
Okay, so 15 starts right there and heads east, right towards the property, it goes along the property line, and then you come this way for 16 goes right back to about right there. Then 17's the short one, and then 18 comes up the hill.
How does that area relate to what you were discussing earlier about improved stormwater runoff, capture and drainage, et cetera? Is that in that same area?
It is, yeah, that whole area up above, up in here, this drive range on that other detail. The existing drainage all comes down along here to the north, and some of it goes into that one area drain, which is probably about right in here. That will be removed, and we'll be putting, because we're extending it, regrading the whole area. But now it will be captured with those 3 area drains along the swale in front of the berm. So yeah, it collects a lot of this runoff. It sheet flows, so that means basically water's running across the grass everywhere. It's not discharged at one location. So, but that'll be collected.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
The kind of tag teaming on that, Ken, the existing storm line that you're going to tie into has capacity to handle this water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The access off of Overlook, that's for the maintenance building only?
That is correct. Yeah, it's a temporary construction access, like Evan mentioned, and that will be, it's designed to allow the separation between the contractors initially, with LORAC being coming off of Stafford Road, and then this one would be for the contractor to come off of Overlook. But this one off of Overlook is in the same exact location of the permanent roadway coming in there, and that's what Evan had mentioned. So we're kind of like, did you follow that?
Well, okay.
So the driveway, yeah, the driveway over there is,
That's condition 8.
yeah, this is part of the construction access that will go in there. The permanent road for the LORAC will also be in here, and it goes up in here. It's kind of grade back. So they're doing some of the work for the golf course to get it a little bit to grade, and then the LORAC will come in and do the permanent construction for the driveway.
So access for both will be off of Overlook?
Correct. Well, this is, for this application, the access currently comes in off of Stafford Road as it exists today in this application, standalone.
But if LORAC doesn't go, you're going to pave the one off of Overlook?
The existing conditions of the Stafford access and the existing parking will accommodate the golf course improvements as it exists, as it will exist after construction. Yeah. That goes back to the 77 parking, the parking for the golf course, and there's 95 spaces out there today. So again, the existing parking can handle the golf course after construction of the golf course.
Okay.
Same with the access.
Maybe Evan can help me on this. So the temporary road is off Overlook,
Correct.
Yeah.
and condition number 8 says it's going to get paved if LORAC doesn't go.
Yeah, condition C8 requires paving that.
So and then if there's no LORAC, that is for just maintenance, or is that access to the parking
Be access to the maintenance building.
only?
But it would connect to the existing parking lot. At
So
this
it could be
point, they
used-
probably would want to come back for a modification to this approval and change their plans. That's also an option.
All right. I just,
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Could you comment on the usage that's anticipated for the existing clubhouse, particularly as relates to parking or traffic impacts? I had understood at times the facility was used for social events, or maybe that was just something that was discussed in the past. I'm understanding in this application, there's no anticipation that social events or receptions or parties will be held there.
That's correct. There's no anticipation for that with the clubhouse.
And that's been the history in recent times.
I can't speak to that because I haven't used it enough or been around it enough, so.
I see.
On the clubhouse.
Any other questions for the applicant? Well, thank you very much for that overview. We really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks.
We will now hear testimony, if any, from the public. And I wanted to ask if there is anyone participating in the hearing who wishes to speak in favor of the application and its elements. Hearing none, I will ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. I have an understanding that a representative of the Stafford Hamlet is here. Is that correct?
On Zoom.
City Attorney Boone, how much time do we have for the Stafford Hamlet opponent?
I think in the previous one, I considered them a incorporated public interest group, so I gave them 10 minutes, like a neighborhood association.
Okay, very good. Mr. Cook, are you available?
Is the Stafford Hamlet part of Lake Oswego?
No, I don't think so. It's like a county CPO kind of a thing.
Okay. CPO?
County planning organization, like a neighborhood association, but in a county.
Okay.
Actually, Lusher Farm is actually in the Stafford Hamlet.
Yes, those parcels are within the area you
Yes.
define as the hamlet, yes.
Just to let you to know that piece to it. So hopefully I can share the document with you here. And I'll just try to keep this quick. I know there's a few probably that cringed to see that I was back again but just a couple quick things that note that I think a couple of people mentioned it this evening already, that just in looking at the overall cumulative effect of thing, it just doesn't make sense. And I know there's not a LOC number that I could plug that on, say this doesn't make sense. But looking at it as a public person our family has lived in this area for 122 years, and it means a lot to us. But as we go through and looking at some information that was at your last meeting, it talked about the traffic analysis impact, exhibit F00F, now right here. Basically says, assess the cumulative impact of the proposed development of Rassekh Park in the Oswego Recreation in Lorac. But the piece that caught me was the golf course renovation project, which will be reviewed at separate DRC hearings, which I'm assuming this is one of them, will also look at cumulative impacts. And then I'm kind of hearing tonight, well, we look at them individually, and then once we get together and at some point in time, we might look at them. So is there a plan to look at all of the projects that are going in that are going to look at as the cumulative impacts at one point? So that's one question. Interesting comment, and I don't know if Mr. Powers is still there, but Bruce, did I just dream this, or was there actually a comment at either one of the neighborhood meetings or one of the task force that said that the city was looking hard at moving the clubhouse or the sign-in sheet down to the recreation center and using the clubhouse as weddings, meetings, special events, and that thing? So that would be another question. The traffic study, this is just something I thought I'd throw out there. Is after reading the article in the newspaper, it talked about once again, the cumulative effects of it. But if you just looked at, here's all the 25 different things within a quarter of a mile, and we're saying that it's really not going to impact it. I don't think there's anybody that's seriously looking at this that knows that this area right here is going to be pounded, not only from the Lake Oswego improvements, even counting the Lusher Farm piece, all those things, but also knowing that, the new season's market's opening. So there's going to be more traffic coming like that. But, and Ivan, who I love dearly, put on there, says the key aspect of planning is making sure park facilities are spread evenly throughout the town, and felt this was the case despite the amount of fields and recreational spaces near the roundabout. And that's why we put this together. There's 25 different venues and or I guess as they call them, opportunities throughout the community. Well, that's a heck of a lot. I did have a question when looking at 6 through 11. So if you start at 6 at the Aquatic Center, understand recreation complex right next to it, Parks and Rec's office go in there. Once again, I would love to know about what they're going to do about the clubhouse. Is it going to be an event center or not? And as they were doing their parking structure, and that's why we brought up the Rassekh piece, because supposedly they looked at Lorac, the golf course, and Rassekh all at the same time. But in looking at that, did they look at saying, okay, look at the elements that are going into the golf course? One, if it was just standing on itself, what is the parking traffic issues for a driving range? I'm not sure if that was ever to account it or taken into account with that. The event center, we already talked about that. If you go through all of those things there as a collective group, you go 6 through 11, that is going to pound this area. And so once again, it's just a question of, is there an accumulative study? And I know they're going to study from the roundabout down to McVeigh, down to 43 and say, oh, yeah, let's have a comp plan for that. Well, and working with the county and on numerous projects, and especially what's from the roundabout down to the river with widening of Stafford Road, we know that that area and the roundabout is going to be impacted. And it's going to be at least 8 to 10 years before they do anything at the roundabout. It's not on their current transportation plan for the county. So once again, it just gets a little daunting that if we can't get a plan now, then what's it going to cost us in 10 to 8 to 10 years? And just one more other point to bring up is that Mayor Buck at our C4, which is Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, which has all the mayors and specific groups in there, and he talked about what ODOT was doing to us, and the fact that the city is kind of using the same thing about cumulative traffic issues in our area. Well, they're saying like, well, ODOT needs to look at diversion. ODOT needs to look at the things that are going to come through here. And it says, we're not against the parks, but what we're against is cramming all this stuff out here. And it's not like as he said in his comment, he says, we're not asking for years of delays. We're asking for some months to put a very reasonable approach together. And Will Farley could probably mention about when the ARPA funded study is going to be done and maybe give us some ideas on it. And one last thing is in looking at the manual for uniform control and, the ITE information, it basically says the manual should not be considered a substitute for engineering judgment. And I think that's the piece that we're looking at. And some of the board members right there saying, are we using good judgment, not looking at the entire piece here? And I think you guys all do good work. You do it for a living. I'm this little knucklehead that goes, this does not make sense in the real world to a lot of us out here. So from the geographical standpoint, it's just too much in one area. And we're not against it if it's done right. So with that, I will sign off and thank you for your listening. And hopefully we can make this something that we can all be proud of. Oh, and I do have one last question for Mr. Boone. There was some talk between a couple of the different of the neighborhood associations in the area about, is there a fee waiver for neighborhood associations if they were to decide to appeal either this decision or the Rassekh property one? And I'm done.
Okay, Mr. Cook, just hang on and we'll see if we have any questions. Commissioners, are there questions for Mr. Cook? Very good. Any additional comments from staff before Mr. Cook departs? And we can take his questions later. All right. Anything else, Mr. Cook?
Just in case, I want to be around just in case there's something that comes up that if I need to keep the record up and open or something along those lines. So I'll hang out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. Any other parties opposed to the application? I would like to call on a couple of witnesses who have indicated they're neither for nor against the application. Deborah Wilkinson and Meg Wilkinson.
Sort of together.
Okay, I didn't know.
All right. Each person has 5 minutes. It's not like the whole,
We're not going to keep you that long, I
okay.
promise.
All right, so I'm going to time you then for 5 minutes, and then you'll testify. If you
We're both on Marjorie, which is right on the west side of the golf course. And interesting enough, I said I'm neither here nor there, but for 20 years I was a volunteer at the golf course. And so in 2004, just for your information, one of the city council actually commissioned a study for the golf course and to see how they could make it better. And the problems that were coming up, we waited 20 years to get some resolution. Unfortunately for golfers, we had to lose a little bit of our land in order to get potentially some good things happening on the golf course. So from that standpoint, I'm very appreciative of that. From the neighborhood standpoint, I would like to ask you to, and I always forget the condition C10, the pathway. I would like to have that go to the question of at the rec center and the aquatic center. Have it discussed then, because I have to tell you, I've been a golfer, golfing every week, and never have I thought to cart my clubs up to the golf course, even if there was a path. I just wouldn't do it, because the path that they're talking about will take you to Overlook. So this is not, as you mentioned, a golf course path. It is for the rec center. So I really ask that that be positioned in the rec center discussion and remove it from this proposal. Our neighborhood, all of us have voiced our concerns about that path. We would like to address it in the proper area, and not if the rec center doesn't get approved, that then it automatically goes in, because there is no need for it. I don't understand definition of feasible. I don't see a definition in there, and it is unfeasible to me to have a public pathway right beside a golf course. I don't want to hit people when I'm golfing. And so that's not feasible to me if you're going to use feasible. But I would ask if you can remove that tonight from consideration and put it with the rec center where it belongs. And our neighbors will have some say in that. And we'll probably not persevere. Thank you. But I do love the golf course. Oh, questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Have you completed your comments?
I have. Do you have any questions?
And you are Meg?
I'm Deborah.
Deborah. Are there questions for Deborah from the commissioners? If not, we'll go ahead and proceed to Meg's comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
When all of the debate came up for...
Move the microphone a little closer so people listening can hear you.
I talk soft anyway. So when we started out down this path, looking at the rec center, the golf course, all the development, we were told that there was going to be a path there, that there was absolutely no way around it. Code required the path. So when I looked at the code and saw if feasible, I thought that actually gives you guys some leeway as to whether you decided that the path is feasible or not. I do have some severe concerns about the path based on our neighborhood. I don't know if you're aware of how the neighborhood comes up, Fernwood comes up, Marjorie, and it goes around to Banyan, and then to Cloverleaf. It makes a nice little circle. About 3 years ago, the high school changed how they did their parking. for whatever reason, during the school days, Marjorie has cars parked on both sides. There is no sidewalks on any of those streets. So it's actually quite dangerous to walk along there, because you either have to walk in the middle of the street or you have to kind of walk on the other side of the cars. So now if we put a pathway in there, I know what's going to happen, because I've seen it all the time with the high school. Overlook gets really congested. Parents are in a hurry to get to work, so they drop their kids, ramming down Cloverleaf, throwing the kid out the door. Sometimes they slow down, not always, but they throw the kid out the door and the kid walks up and then they go zooming off. This is what's going to happen with the rec center, because Stafford is a mess. And I know that if I avoid Stafford as it is now, and if we, with all the new recreation facilities along there, and especially during the time parents are coming home from work, they're going to be wanting to pick up their kids from the teen center, which I assume is going to be at the rec center. So you're going to have a lot of traffic. So you're going to have parents looking for ways to pick up their children away from Stafford or Overlook. And that is where they're going to be. It's going to be along Cloverleaf, and they're going to zoom around Marjorie. And remember, no sidewalks. When there's events up at the rec center with only 97 spaces. And so when they have some really cool events down there, especially when they were down at Palisades Elementary, they were parking up around Marjorie simply because it's a really popular. We're fortunate that we have an incredible Parks and Rec, but it's also a very popular one. And so we are going to have parking along there. And so we can kind of discourage people from parking in our neighborhood by not having a path along there. We might be able to alleviate some of that parking, at least until we can get sidewalks. And I don't know where they are on the capital improvement project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Jeff?
Evan, can you pull the slide up so we can see the pathway they're talking about?
I can, if she can bring up my presentation.
Just to refresh my mind.
Oops, the wrong one, sorry.
That was wrong. There'll be a new fence on the north side of it. It goes in and out of the existing fence there now.
Can I ask a question? I just wanted to know, is there going to be also a fence on the school side? Because they have, during athletic events, want to have that closed off so that people can buy tickets. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a corridor of fencing along the pathway.
I'll defer to the applicant. There's nothing shown on the plans.
I don't think it'll be. What process are?
Okay, interesting.
The question should be directed to the commission?
Sorry about that.
Any other questions?
Evan, I'm not with you. So the path is on the golf course side or not?
It goes in and out. Part of it,
It's ducks under the fence?
well, they're going to remove the existing fence and build a new one.
Yeah, so which side of the fence will it be on?
The south side.
Okay, so it's outside the fence.
The new fence that they're going to install, yes.
So then what's the path for?
It's to connect Banyan and Cloverleaf to the parking lot.
Where's it connect at? And that's for the golf course?
The maintenance building is right there. That's where the new parking lot will be for the Lower Act project.
And the purpose of the path is what?
Well, the code requires pedestrian connection to a new development. if feasible. That's what they're doing.
So it's for pedestrians to walk up the path to the parking lot of the golf course.
It's for the pedestrians who live over, to the west, to be able to go to the rec center without having to drive all the way around. So it's a
What rec center?
connectivity. Well, it'll be to the new rec center, but also to the golf course site. They can access
We
both
can't talk about the rec
projects.
center.
Well, but they're dependent upon one another, as is conditioned in the staff report.
And the pathway is proposed as part of the rec center, Lower Rec.
It
That's
serves
why.
both purposes for both projects.
Okay.
The
I'm with you.
criteria requires each application to address that.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So the pathway will be in the Laura application as well.
It is, so it's officially, that's where it's proposed, but they triggered that standard as part of this development because of the maintenance building.
Each application is subject to that criteria,
Right.
criterion.
Can I ask staff a question?
Yes, please.
What would happen if we approved it in Lorac and disproved it here?
Well, if you found that the criteria, that this project did not require that criteria, you wouldn't approve it here. If you found that it did require it, you would approve it here. But I don't know, in what scenario?
Well, I just meant if one said yes and one said no, what do you do?
What, if one says yes,
It
and
trumps the
if
no?
that project is developed, then it would be built.
Okay,
Okay, because it all depends upon the
I understand.
trigger by that development.
Okay.
So it's an element to be independently assessed in each application.
Right, does that develop trigger this criterion? And if so, then the pathway, if feasible, is required.
Any other questions of the witnesses? Megan, Deborah, thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses who wish to testify for or against, or neither for nor against? If not, Deputy Attorney Boone, should we hear further from the applicant?
Well, yes, given the fact that there was a person who testified neither for nor against, and that could be considered partly against on it, so I think that would be in the rebuttal pen.
Are we prepared to go to that? We also had the Stanford Hamlet testifying against.
Right, that too. So does the applicant wish to do any 5-minute rebuttal?
Yeah, just one thing in regards to the traffic study. It's pretty clear if you look at the traffic study that was done, the revised one, that the level of service at the roundabout is a level service B in both the AM and PM peak hours, and a level of service A in the Saturday peak. An acceptable level of service it's a V over C for the county. It's a different volume over capacity ratio, so it meets that. But as far as the city, it's a level service E that's acceptable, an acceptable operating standard for an intersection. So you can see that, and this is for the 2024 construction of all 3 projects. If they were all built, this would be the level of service that the roundabout would meet today in 2024. So a level service B for the AM, the PM peak hours, and then the Saturday was a level service A. So it's not failing by traffic standards. And it will not fail by traffic standards after all 3 of these projects are built. It's a corridor level area that, I think Will has talked to about it in the past as well, but it's, traffic isn't just coming from these 3 projects. It's coming from the north and the south. It's a regional area. So, but as far as meeting the code, the requirements for this application, the traffic report demonstrates that it's not a failing intersection roundabout. The ADT, which is the average daily traffic on Stafford, is definitely a lot less than an arterial can handle on a 2-lane roadway. So I think that's, just want to mention, and, you know, and just in general, I guess the TSP, transportation system plans, they develop, these are prepared a lot by the consultants and stuff working with the cities and the counties for long-term, short-term, mid-range capital projects. And that's where you have to kind of look at it from a standpoint of as far as improvements to roads, highways, whatever it is. That's where they come from a lot of times. So, but for this application though, we've met the level of service. We've shown that. So that's all I want to say. Oh, and that was on, if you wanted to reference, it's on page 14 of the TIA.
So you're saying you've exceeded actually the minimum requirements?
Well, it exceeds, yeah. I mean, we didn't do anything. It calculates out to where it meets the level of service. Yeah, the model, all the calculations. So that's page 14 on the April 7th, 2022 revised traffic report.
Thank you. Are there other questions of the rebuttal witness? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's good. I think I've said enough.
Thank you very much.
All right, to the audience, is there any request to continue the public hearing for an opportunity to present additional evidence? And Iris, please make sure Mr. Cook is available. I think he indicated he might want to.
Pardon? Mr. Cook, are you there? I'm not showing him.
I'm here.
All right, Mr. Cook, this is the time to request to continue the public hearing for an opportunity to present additional evidence. You indicated that you might wish to do so depending on what evidence was submitted in the hearing, so this is the time to do so if you wish to do that.
I am raising my hand.
Okay, I can't see it.
We can't see you visually.
Well.
All right, so thank you very much then. We have received a request to continue the hearing. As the commission is aware of the procedure, I'll just review it for the public. The hearing must be continued. The question to the commission is what the form of the continuance, whether it shall be continued to the next hearing on August the 8th.
August the 1st.
August the 1st, sorry. I come back from vacation on the 8th. August the 1st. And that would be for oral or written. That's one option. That's just like we had today. People would have to submit the written materials before the noon Monday for us to review it and your commission review it. Or leave it open for written submittals only, written record only. And if that's the case, then any new evidence may be submitted in written materials generally 1 week from today. So that would be the 25th by close of business 5 p.m. And then any rebuttal evidence to the new evidence that was submitted by the 25th. That is, if there is no evidence submitted by the 25th, there's no right to submit rebuttal, okay? Sometimes people have tried that. Any rebuttal to the new evidence would then be submitted by the 27th, close of business day. That would then provide staff essentially a day and a half to review the information and submit a staff memo to you and get that out by close of business Friday, so you then be ready for the following Monday hearing, continued hearing. So you have to decide which form of continuance to do.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you feel that continuing it for written materials only is sufficient, or should we have oral and written? Kirk?
Written only is my suggestion.
Any other comments?
Agree with that.
Agreed.
I think the consensus here is that we continue for written materials only.
Then and I'll style the motion and somebody can move what I say. Then this public hearing is continued for the submission of written materials only. Any person may submit new evidence by July 25 at 5 p.m., and any rebuttal to that new evidence submitted must be received by July 27 at 5 p.m., and the hearing would then be continued for deliberation only on August 1 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The motion passes. We'll receive written materials only and will continue the hearing for that purpose. Is there other business for our consideration this evening?
Excuse me, this is Rick, if I could just inquire if Mr. Boone had an answer to the waiver of an appeal for a neighborhood association?
Yeah, I would suggest you contact staff tomorrow.
Okay.
The discussion of that item is not relevant to the commission, so just contact staff.
Thank you.
We have. Excuse me. Do we have schedule review or management update?
Yes, I can
Thank
do a
you.
brief update. We have our next hearing, as you note, is on August 1st. Besides the continuance of this hearing, we will also have a hearing on a conditional use permit for a preschool. The next hearing after that is August 15th, and that would be the LORAC project. And so those are the only upcoming hearings that we have so far. I don't have anything as of yet scheduled for September. I will keep you posted, of course.
And so our next meeting is August 1st?
The next meeting is August 1st, and I will note that both, it just so happens that both Mr. Boone and I will be on vacation. Community Development Director Scott Siegel will be filling in for me, and as will City Attorney Jason Lewis, and they'll help run that meeting. Jason happens to be out of town, and so he will be participating remotely. So it'll be a little unusual, but you will have staff here to cover. So.
Well, we'll look forward to having them.
Yes.
Any other business tonight? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.